From WAMU 88.5 at American University in Washington, welcome to the Politics Hour, guest starring Will Sommer. I'm Kojo Nandi. Will Sommer is our guest analyst today. He's the Loose Lips columnist and reporter for Washington City Paper. Will, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us in studio is Jeffrey DeWitt. He is the Chief Financial Officer for the District of Columbia. Jeffrey DeWitt, good to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
Nice meeting you, and thank you for having me.
If you have questions or comments for Jeffrey DeWitt, you can start calling now, 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org. You can go to our website, kojo.org, and watch the live video stream there and submit questions or comments. You can also shoot us a tweet at Kojo Show. Well, you have been covering and moderating debates involving both the Ward 8 and the Ward 4 candidates. Let's start with Ward 8. What's to be noticed there, except that one person has a whole lot of money?
Sure. So this is a pretty wild race. You've got, I've stopped trying to keep track of how many candidates are in, how many dropped out, but roughly a dozen candidates running to replace Marion Barry, including his son, who's now styling himself Marion Barry. So yeah, there's a lot going on in that race. Muriel Bowser has a pick. Vince Gray has a pick. There's a lot of people running.
But the money, apparently, much of it is going to Ruby LeMay.
Right. LaRuby May, who's
LaRuby May.
Right.
Yeah, I got it right. She gets it right.
Muriel Bowser's thrown it behind her. LaRuby ran Muriel Bowser's campaign in Ward 8 last year, so she obviously knows how to get the vote out. I don't know if she's necessarily the most popular candidate if you polled the entire ward, but she certainly probably has the best get out the vote operation for Tuesday.
Are you running in that race?
I am not running, nor would I ever plan to, by the way.
Probably the only person in the District of Columbia who isn't. If he's not running in that race, he might be running in the other race in Ward 4. How many candidates there?
Oh, I think it's 11 right now.
Ooh.
Right, exactly. So these are people running to replace Muriel Bowser, who's obviously mayor now. In this race, you haven't seen as much of an opposition emerge to Brandon Todd, who's Muriel Bowser's handpicked successor.
And who's also raised more money than anybody else.
Way more, exactly.
In the debate there, did you notice anything? Anything unusual?
Sure. So we had a city paper debate a couple weeks ago, and just the way it worked out, I was sitting next to Brandon Todd, and one of the moderators asked him which historical figure he most admires, his leadership style.
Like any good reporter, you peered over to see what he was doing.
I did. Well, so it's a pretty softball question. The other candidates really had no trouble answering it. But then I see him Googling, and it's a picture of Lord Byron comes up, and I was like, that's an unusual choice. But I look over and I see, in fact, that he's just Googled historical figure, and he picks Martin Luther King, who's also like the first result on Google for that.
His next campaign slogan is going to be shades over all of our mobile devices, so reporters can't see exactly what we're Googling, because they're spying on us at all times. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are considering legislation that could change to local anti-discrimination laws recently enacted by the DC Council. One of them has to do with giving employees more freedom in their reproductive decision. The other, an exemption for religious institutions that define homosexuality as sin, is being, in a way, overturned. Talk about that.
Right, exactly. So the district passed these two laws. Now we see Representative Jason Chaffetz, who's sort of the district's congressional overlord. He is really cracking down. We saw him get mad at the district in February when we legalized marijuana despite his warning, and now he's trying to overturn these laws. This isn't going to go anywhere in the end because he just won't be able to get the president to approve on it. But certainly it is just another sign of sort of belligerence between him and the district.
Not only did he want to overturn the district's marijuana law, but the 420 apparent smokeout that was held on the mall apparently upset him also, to the point where he's thinking of investigating the park police. What's going on?
Sure. So 420, for your listeners who aren't know, is a very significant marijuana number. So on April 20th, there was a big marijuana event, and some people showed up with actual joints. And the key here is that despite legalization in the district, it's not legal on federal land or smoking anywhere in public. So this was still illegal. But the park police didn't do anything about it, even though it was being tweeted about. It was no secret. So Jason Chaffetz is very unhappy that none of these people were arrested.
And let the record show that we said several times that it is illegal on federal land before the smokeout actually occurred. So they did so in violation of our warnings too, but we're not we're not calling for anybody to be investigated at this point anyway. There was quite a bit of to do before the council this week between, on the one hand, Mayor Muriel Bowser, and on the other hand, the city's Attorney General Carl Racine. The hearing apparently went on for a long time, and a lot of it had to do with the powers of the Attorney General.
Sure. So the development here is that in 2014, we saw the election of Carl Racine as the district's first independent Attorney General. Previously, it's been an employee of the mayor. So Muriel Bowser here, to give her the benefit of the doubt that we're still
Why?
Well, we're still not used to the powers. This was even something. Obviously, a lot of people, including Muriel Bowser, wanted to postpone this election to 2018. But so now we have Carl Racine, and he was on your show, and he said that she essentially wants to be able to give her own employees the right to do the legal review for city laws, and he's very unhappy with this. He says it's a power grab. She claims that it's sort of, she has her own accusations that he's doing a power grab by trying to review laws despite not being one of her employees.
And the council seems to be on both sides and against both sides on this issue.
Sure. It's kind of not clear. It's not clear yet how the council is shaken out. We can sort of expect people who opposed having an election in 2014, people like Jack Evans, for example, to be a little warier of a more empowered attorney general, whereas people like Kenny McDuffie, for example, has so far stayed on the sidelines, but he did sort of prevent this Muriel Bowser power grab, if you will, from being just slipped in through the Budget Support Act. So he's certainly giving it more scrutiny, and I believe Phil Mandelson, the chairman, is as well.
Tom Sherwood, our resident analyst, is away in Cuba working. We hope he will be back next. Will Sommer is our guest analyst today. He's the Loose Lips columnist and reporter for Washington City Paper. Our guest in studio is Jeffrey DeWitt, the Chief Financial Officer for the District of Columbia. If you have questions or comments for Mr. DeWitt, call us at 800-433-8850 or send email to kojo@wamu.org or watch our live video stream at the website, kojoshow.org, where you can also join the conversation. You're the Chief Financial Officer for a big city with a big budget, Jeffrey DeWitt. That's the city's wrestling with a legal debate over whether it has the right to spend its own locally raised funds without congressional interference. You have taken the position that a voter-approved referendum for so-called budget autonomy was not, in fact, legal. Your pal, Carl Racine, the Attorney General, has also taken the same position. I only refer to him as your pal because your position on this issue is the same. But that position has triggered a lawsuit from the D.C. Council. How would you explain your view?
Yeah, this issue came up last year after the council had proposed to follow the act as approved by the voters, and the Attorney General at the time and the new Attorney General and a federal judge have all ruled that the law isn't valid. So my issue is, as a chief financial officer who would have to pay the bills under that particular law, is I need clarity from the courts in terms of I have two attorney generals, a federal judge that have said that it's not valid, and in my own general counsel, which were the CFO is an independent entity in the District of Columbia. So if the judge were to rule, the appeals court that it's at right now were to rule it's valid, I'll gladly do it right away. I support budget autonomy, but it needs to be deemed legally valid by the courts in order to do that.
I'm glad you said you support budget autonomy, because assuming that, what would you say is the best avenue for the city to obtain it?
Well, the court said we have to obtain it through Congress. So that's what the last federal judge said. Only Congress can grant the budget autonomy. And I think there's lots of arguments that we can make over time, meeting with members of Congress, talking to them about the benefits of it. It would be better for our bond rating. It would be better for our credit not to be subject to federal shutdowns and issues like that. So it is something that I think in the long run we need to keep striving for, keep fighting for, and make the case of the value it has to not only our citizens but to what it costs to run government. So it's something we should continue to strive for. You
came here from Phoenix, one of the biggest cities in the country, certainly bigger than Washington, even though not with a bigger city budget. But I'm really curious, did the quirks of DC's relationship with the federal government and the debates over DC home rule, how different is that from your previous experience, and how does that inform your challenges and expectations about this job?
Well, the CFO position in Washington D.C. is like none other in the country. There's no doubt about that, because it's an independent entity that is that has to have a relationship with Congress and the mayor and the council all together. So there it was more of a relationship with the state. So the city of Phoenix would have discussions and sometimes battles with the state oversight of the cities, where here it's more of the federal relationship. But it's the federal government relationship is much more complicated here. You have oversight committees, you have a strong mayor form of government here, where there was a city manager form of government, which is a whole different set of rules and things like that. So this is one of the most interesting CFO job. I'm enjoying it very much, but it is
It's really a lot more fun here.
it's a lot more fun here. Yes, that's
Well,
an understatement.
Sure. As far as budget autonomy goes, there's a lot of statehood activists who would say, let's just do it. It's by court ruling. Let's do some civil disobedience. In your worst case scenario, let's say you did support going forward with this. Where do you concern the consequences would be?
Well, the issue ultimately is, one, from my perspective, it has to be legal, because I think you want your chief financial officer to follow the law. I think anybody would say that. You don't want your lead of your finance department not following the law, but probably Congress would likely step in. But if the judge were to rule that it's valid, we would immediately support the mayor and the council and take it forward and see where it goes from there. It is something in the long run we want to strive to get, from my perspective, and I think from the Attorney General's perspective, and is we just need to have it validated by the courts.
That's not what you think. Do you think that the chief financial officer should operate on the premise that the district has budget autonomy, 800-433-8850, or not? Should he be more cautious in his approach? You can also send email to coach@wmu.org. Your office launched a blog called District Measured, where readers can learn about how all kinds of wonky economic issues are shaping the face of the city, and experiences running the gamut from the challenges to find a home in a neighborhood with access to a great elementary school to the disappearance of mom and pop retail. District Measured recently posted a piece on how the DC economy has evolved since 2008, the dawn of the Great Recession, and it laid out wide disparities that have grown in the city. How would you describe what we're seeing here?
Well, the District of Columbia probably didn't get hit as hard by the recession as many other places in the country, like Phoenix, Arizona, where the real estate market literally collapsed and we lost half of the property taxes here. What you see that's been happening in the last several years is federal sequestration and the impact of the cutbacks in the federal government. But what we've been very fortunate on is the private sector has really taken off here. So you see more private sector jobs coming in than we're losing in federal jobs, which is different than, let's say, Northern Virginia, which is being hit harder by that. So there's a huge dynamic going on in terms of millennials moving here. We're the coolest city in the country, as they say now, and issues like that. And we have a younger population moving in. We have the private sector taking off like it has not in many other parts of the country, which has allowed us to actually continue to do better than most cities in the country in terms of moving forward financially. Bond ratings have been upgraded several times since that period of time. Our revenues are growing faster than most places, and so our pensions are fully funded. So we're in better shape than most places because of how the economy has diversified, which has made us actually stronger in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years.
Sure. So we talked earlier about Muriel Bowser sort of clashing with AG Carl Racine. You have your own independent office. Are you having any issues with her, as far as looking to take some more responsibilities into her office?
I have a very good relationship with the mayor. This is my 7th mayor I've worked for during my career. I've been in public service for over 25 years, and I have a very good working relationship with her. We worked on the budget through that process together and back and forth with putting that together. So no, I've had nothing but good experiences, including we traveled up to New York together with Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Evans, and as a result of that, we actually got our bond ratings upgraded as a result of that trip. So I've had good experiences working with
Did you discuss your position on the budget autonomy while you were traveling with the mayor?
We did. We talked
You agreed
about
to disagree?
We respectfully agree to disagree. Yes, it's a respectful discussion. It's we all want it. It's just a matter of positions about whether it's valid or not.
Will, others, and I in the media are waiting when this discussion will become disrespectful. That'll make it really interesting.
Not planning on that. Just for the record.
But the mayor, I'm glad you brought her up, because the mayor's big policy push is about creating pathways to the middle class. What concerns do you have about the availability of middle wage or middle class jobs in the district? The blog seems to be showing that middle class jobs are slipping into lower income jobs.
You know, I think the biggest challenges we have in the district, and it's mentioned in the mayor's budget, and it's mentioned by council members as we've been going through. Affordable housing is a challenge. How do you make sure a middle class household, or even when it's below middle class, can afford to live in the district because of the price of homes and what it costs to live here, and making sure we're bringing those jobs in and doing things to attract the types of businesses into the district that provide those job opportunities. So, you know, jobs, homelessness, affordable housing, and you can go a little bit further into infrastructure, making sure we have a quality transportation systems and all those types of good schools. You know, if we want the middle class to do well, we want people to do well, we got to have good schools. So all those things are things that, you know, roll back into the finance area. And those are things that the budget on both the mayor and council side are working to try to solve in the long run.
But if middle class jobs, people who have been clerks, people who have been secretaries, they are slipping into lower income jobs, where are the jobs that have been created in the district during the past several years coming from?
I think to some degree, and going to your point, some of the jobs that are being created are more the service level industries, like the restaurants and some of the retail sides, which are not necessarily the highest level jobs. So things like medical, biomedical, those types of jobs are where you can actually bring those incomes up. I think some of the challenges, a lot of the jobs that are being created are service level jobs. It's mentioned in the District Measured blog, which my staff from the Office for Revenue Analysis puts together, which is basically taking data that's out there and saying, let's get that information out there so we can have a discussion about it in a non-political way, in a neutral way. And that's actually one of those issues is how do you not just have service jobs coming in, bring in those other types of jobs, which is education, training, and bringing those businesses in to provide those jobs.
You should know that Bill Summer considers District Measure a source.
Yeah, certainly.
My staff wants to get a premium, or have you to pay us a fee for your.
No, seriously, it has sort of become a subsidy, I think, for the local news blogs. So, as CFO, it's your job to sort of be the killjoy in the government, tell people when there's not money. There's something coming up that's going to cost a lot of money, which is the DC United Stadium. It looks like that's headed to eminent domain for part of the parcel there. How concerned are you about the cost of that eminent domain and in general potential cost overruns for the stadium?
Well, one of the roles of the CFO when a project comes up like that is to try to look at what it's going to cost and what are the risks with that particular project and making sure that there's enough financial resources to do that. So when we were looking at that particular project, we made sure that there's enough contingencies and reserves and assumptions in that if we do go to eminent domain, we can still afford it without jeopardizing the budget. So there were funds set aside last year in the budget to do that. And when we were doing the analysis, we were looking at what if it costs more for remediation of the environmental compliance? What if we have to pay a little bit more for the land? And unless it gets really out of line, we believe that's built into all the resources necessary to bring that stadium forward.
At the center of all these conversations about the stadium is a debate over how much of a lift these people need, the people who own these teams and who want these stadiums, how much they need from the city in the form of tax breaks and subsidies. What is the measuring stick that you use in order to form an opinion about when it is or when it is not appropriate for the city to offer that kind of help? You didn't like some of the breaks that were offered in the DC United deal.
Well, we were looking at whether or not the subsidies were required for the team to be successful or not. Was the position we were taking, is taking a look at with or without the subsidies, would the team be able to continue to move forward? Was an analysis that we do as part of our legislative requirement. I'm not trying to put this off, but the issue of whether or not you fund a stadium for a football team or a basketball team or a soccer team and whatever city you're in, that's a policy discussion that's really in the purview of the elected officials. It's my role as a CFO to make sure you're aware of what those tax breaks are going to cost and what are they going to you're not going to be able to afford as a result of that. So we have to play the role more of kind of the economic analysis side, but it's a very, you probably can go into the public and get different opinions about whether or not people believe that government has a role in subsidizing sports team. In Phoenix, the city owned the basketball stadium, and the city of Glendale was the owner of the the hockey stadium, and those are controversial issues, but they're really one of the things is stay out of the policy side, but make sure the policymakers have full and accurate information about whether those subsidies are needed or not. They can still give them, but it's my role to say, well, they're not necessary for the project to go forward.
The city owns the basketball stadium, but the team didn't make the playoffs. The Wizards
I know
did.
that.
Aren't you glad?
Yeah,
you came to Washington?
I'm glad I'm in DC. At least I get to watch playoff basketball here.
Please
Yeah.
don your headphones because we're about to go to the telephone. Here is Adam in Silver Spring, Maryland. Adam, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Kojo. My question is for your guest there. He said he supports budget autonomy. And as a general premise, I think home rule for D.C. is a good idea. My question, though, is how do you reconcile budget autonomy and home rule with Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which specifically gives Congress exclusive control over the seat of government? I think there was a real concern when they drafted that local politicians not have outsized influence in national politics.
Well, I believe that is the whole issue as to why my general counsel and the attorney generals and the GAO office that Congress had looked at said that is exactly the issue why the Budget Autonomy Act was invalid. And that is a struggle. The act was the vote was trying to find a way to have that be allowed legally in spite of that particular area. But you kind of nailed the whole issue there, I think, in terms of why the legal analysis has said that that's a difficult lift, and the first level of courts actually agreed with that same position.
Indeed, the judge in the case, Emmett Sullivan, said that he sympathizes or empathizes with the district's position, but he didn't see how he could rule in favor of the district. Adam, thank you very much for your call. I wanted to get back briefly to the issue of the DC United Stadium and the kinds of tax abatements that it wanted. To what degree do you feel that these kinds of breaks may have contributed to the economic disparities we see in the city? After all, the explosion in rents is for both commercial and residential properties.
Well, I think the real explosion in the cost of rents, both in commercial, it has a lot to do with the population increase that we have going here. You could maybe make the argument about subsidies, but I think it's a very minor impact on it. It's more the issue that we have 1,000 people a month moving here, which is driving up housing demand. This is a great place to have a business come. It's a great place to live and work. I personally love living here and would recommend many other people come here. But when you have that population boom that's coming here, that drives up home prices, and that's the struggle of demand and supply that we're running into.
But that might be changing because the census numbers now indicate that for the first time in decades, population growth in this region and even in the District of Columbia seems to be slowing. We're still growing,
Right.
but we're growing at a slower rate. What do you see at work here?
Yeah, we have, that's absolutely correct. The population growth rate has slowed in recent times. So the issue for district government, for lack of a better way of saying this, is making sure we make this an attractive place for those people who live here to stay here. That's why schools are incredibly important, that people want to, whenever their kids get out of elementary school and go to middle school, they want to stay here. When they go to high school, they want to stay here. When we can keep people living here and working here, not just people coming from the outside, from my perspective as a CFO, they're paying income taxes, they're eating at the restaurants and things like that. So it's the issue of keeping people moving here and having people both live and work here is really the policy issue we have to work on as government going forward.
So, as CFO, you're looking out for, these unforeseen circumstances. City's seen a huge drop in revenue from speed cameras. I believe it's something like 55% or something. And that's like a huge amount of the city's budget. So how much in trouble are we here?
Okay, first I'm going to correct 55 million is not a large amount of it, 12.9.
No, I thought 55%.
Yeah,
No. I see 55 million total.
million.
Excuse me.
Yeah. So it's a relatively small amount of revenue. What happened about a year ago is there were plans to roll out a whole bunch of new equipment in terms of speed cameras, automated traffic enforcement, basically is what it was called. And when we were doing the budget last year, we were anticipating those would be rolled out and that the equipment would continue to operate at the way it is. That did not happen. So what we've done is, so as a CFO, I take no position about whether speed cameras are or a good thing or a bad thing. That's a traffic enforcement and a law enforcement issue. But if it's bringing in revenue, I need to forecast it. And what we did about in June of last year, we saw that those plans not being implemented and the revenue not coming in as anticipated, and we lowered our forecast, which I think is where the discussion came. So our forecast that we have in this year's budget assumes we're going to keep where we're at in terms of traffic camera revenue. And if they do continue and implement a more aggressive program, then that will be extra revenue coming in. But we've taken that whole been a little bit more conservative in the forecast because the program that was anticipated a year ago did not get implemented.
Well, the city's official position enunciated by city leaders and the chief of police is that we don't care about the revenues. We are only concerned about whether this affects people's behavior in traffic. I gather you are agnostic on this issue.
I am agnostic on it. If it comes in, I'll count it. And if I can forecast it, I'll forecast it. But I'm not forecasting that they're going to aggressively roll it out now.
Well, given the disappointment that was expressed by some city leaders at the drop in revenues, I suspect that traffic control was not their only motive here. We got an email from Carl who says, when I got my property assessment notice this year for my home, which year's sales was it based on? 2014, 2013, or what? It doesn't say.
The 2016 assessments that just went out were just a little while ago, were based upon sales that occurred through the end of, I believe it's 2014. So we're usually a little bit, we take the most full information available.
On to the telephones again, because Arrington in Southeast Washington has some suggestions about creative ways for new jobs in the District of Columbia. Arrington, you're on the air. I think I owe you a phone call. You'll get it after the broadcast, but you're on the air, Arrington.
Hi, Arrington. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Thank you, Kojo.
Arrington
I had
Dixon
two
is a
questions.
former chairman of the DC Council, but go ahead.
I'm always trying to find creative ways to create jobs, particularly east of the river. I wonder whether the financial officer could speak to the boxing area and also the Anacostia River Park and river cleanup as possible, almost jobs right away for certainly a lot of people, but east of the river folks in particular.
So the question is
Cleaning up the Anacostia River as a way of bringing new jobs to the District of Columbia, and I know that Arrington Dixon has been talking to a number of people about trying to bring professional boxing back to the District of Columbia as a way of increasing revenues.
I'm always for opportunities to increase revenues. Obviously, as a CFO, programs like that are typically the purview of the mayor in terms of jobs programs and a policy of issues like that. But I'll be glad to go back to the mayor and talk about some of those concepts. But from my perspective, we do need jobs, and that is the unemployment, particularly east of the river, is a challenge that the policymakers are working on, and obviously has an impact on the financials in the long run.
Joining us in the broadcast shortly will be Glenn Ivey. He's a Democratic candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, running for a seat in Maryland's 4th District. We're about to go, but we really haven't laid a glove on this guy.
All right, let's talk about, we just had tax day earlier this month.
Oh, you got to bring that up.
The CFO's office before he took over, had some kind of crummy reputation for customer service. I went in to turn in my taxes, so not a scofflaw here, but I thought it worked out pretty well when I did it. How do you guys think tax day went as far as customer service?
I have a strategic plan I put out last June, and the very number one criteria on there is customer service. And so we did a lot of things from a year ago, and I would say our call drop, our ability to get to people's questions and on taxes is probably 300% or 3 times better than it was a year ago. It's still not really acceptable. It needs a lot more work. That's unlike you'll hear from the IRS who says, hey, things are getting worse. We got better. But one of the things we have going on is we're putting a brand new tax system in. I got about 60 people full-time working on that project right now. And this coming October, your income taxes will be able to be done online in a new modern system that will allow you to track refunds and things like that. And we're going to have a new phone system in place by next October. So I got a new phone system coming in place, a new tax system coming in place that will be implemented over the next 3 years, income tax first. But we put a lot of temporary staffing and other things in. Monitoring customer service, that's a very, very hard focus that all my staff is focused on. We have a long ways to go, but that's a major focus of my office to improve customer service.
All right, well, I guess we'll see you next year.
Yeah, Thank you.
Does that mean that Will and I will be getting more money back?
It means that yeah, you'll be able to track
That's
it as
something
you're
you're willing
getting
to
back.
guarantee?
If you overpay, yes.
Jeffrey DeWitt is the Chief Financial Officer for the District of Columbia. He's giving nothing away. Jeffrey DeWitt, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Will Summers, our guest analyst, he's the Loose Lips columnist and reporter for Washington City Paper. The Nationals, they're no longer playing Chuck Brown's Bustin' Loose for a hit single. For whenever a home run is scored, it's no longer going to be their celebration song. They're using other songs. What's going on?
Right. This is a big controversy. Yeah. So as you say, they used to play Bustin' Loose
By Chuck
for
Brown.
home runs, exactly. And now apparently Bustin' Loose is still in the rotation, the Nats claim, but now you're seeing songs. I believe the Taylor Swift song is one of them, or excuse me, Ariana Grande. So it's a little controversial. There's some old DC, new DC drama going on here. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a little controversial. I mean,
I was cheered by the response of the Chuck Brown family, because the Chuck Brown family, issuing a statement through Brown's manager, Tom Goldfogle, who we've worked with before, says if the Nationals feel another direction is appropriate, that is their prerogative. Chuck would have supported either way because it was DC. A lot of people, when we discuss civil rights issues or issues with police and black men, people say, what would Dr. King have done? In this case, the family said, what would Chuck have done? And I think that's an appropriate approach to anything having to do with Chuck Brown, because Chuck was one of the most generous people anybody ever met. And so if you say, what would Chuck do? Chuck would say, hey, I had a good run. I'm not complaining at this point. What do you think, Glenn?
Yeah, I agree. Chuck Brown was a great guy and very laid back and fabulous musician. So he did have a great run.
Exactly right. And Chuck would probably not be mad about them doing that. Did we mention that Glenn Ivey is a Democratic candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives? He's running for the seat in the Maryland's 4th District. He's a former Maryland State's Attorney for Prince George's County. Glenn Ivey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Big settlement in the John Gear case in Virginia. I wanted to discuss this when Glenn Ivey was here because he had to deal with this issue. A wrongful death lawsuit filed by the family of John Gear, and Fairfax County has decided to pay $2.95 million to the county, even though federal and county prosecutors are still considering the case, haven't brought charges as yet. Those of you will remember that Gear was standing in his doorway of his townhouse with his hands on top of the storm door when he was shot once in the chest. According to police records, his father, best friends were all watching, and there hasn't been a great deal of information coming from Fairfax County about this, but they've decided to go ahead and settle.
This is a pretty remarkable case, Kojo. As you say, this was a case where a police officer shot a man who had a gun but not on him, and essentially had been calm for 40 minutes beforehand. It's interesting, though, because, as you say, no charges have been filed against the officer yet, but the city has already admitted guilt to the tune of $3 million, essentially. Fairfax County has a problem with police brutality. It has for years, and it also has a problem with transparency. Virginia law enforcement has a lot more prerogatives about not releasing information about cases, especially shootings. And so this is just another example of that.
You've had to investigate cases like this before. Remember the case of Ronnie White in Prince George's County. How difficult is it, especially to get cooperation from all officers involved and with a public that's demanding more transparency?
Well, it can be challenging. With respect to the transparency piece, the way I always tried to deal with that was to start speaking to the public immediately and often. Sometimes there are limits on what you can share, especially if there's grand jury information that's coming in, because that's legally secret. And you don't want to put out so much information that it could derail a criminal prosecution. But I think it's important to try and put out as much information as possible. And I think the Fairfax case dragged on for quite a long time. And I think that was part of the problem. The civil settlement's a little interesting because usually those trail, a decision about whether there's going to be a criminal prosecution or not. So they, I guess to their credit, decided, they should just go ahead and make the payment and get that part over with and let the criminal track take care of itself.
On to politics. Donna Edwards is going after Barbara Mikulski's seat in the Senate, which has opened up an opportunity for you to seek a seat in the U.S. House. You came close to challenging Donna Edwards in the past, but didn't. This time you say you're all in. Why do you want to run?
I believe in public service. I've spent the majority of my career in public service, and worked on Capitol Hill, worked as an assistant U.S. attorney, and obviously I was state's attorney in Prince George's County. And, public servants made a huge difference in my life. My parents, for example, we were from Central North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina, Rocky Mountain. We really benefited from certainly Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement. My father got his first break into Manpower, which is part of the War on Poverty. My mother taught in the public schools in Prince William in North Carolina for 40 years. So I guess it's kind of in my DNA, and I want to make a difference, and this is a great way to do it.
So, judging by the campaign finance reports, your race is going very well so far. I think you've raised more than all your opponents combined thus far, including Anthony Brown from the
Former lieutenant governor.
Exactly.
Former candidate for governor.
So, what I'm curious about is, you've been following Donna Edwards' career. If elected, what sort of stuff would you do differently?
Well, I'm not running to necessarily do something different or similar to what she's done or anybody else. I mean, what's driving me with respect to key issues, especially in our district, Prince George's and Anne Arundel County, but nationally as well, there's a lot of people getting left behind right now in this economy. People who are working hard, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, but still treading water, or sometimes falling even further behind than they were. People underwater in their houses. As I go around Prince George's and Anne Arundel, I run into a lot of people who worked hard, played by the rules, but are still having trouble sending their kids to school and that sort of thing. I think as a nation, we really need to focus on turning that around, and that would be my top priority if I got to Congress.
Donna Edwards has often focused on women's issues and the problems facing working families during her time in Congress. She identifies with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Where do you fit, in your own view, into the ideological spectrum of your party, if you?
Well, I think I've definitely ended up in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party in a lot of respects. I mean, when I was state's attorney, one of the issues I found was that prosecutors, we had a national entity called NDAA, and I just thought it was just too moderate. It really wasn't taking the stand on issues that I thought we needed to take stand on. So I formed my own, so the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, and used that to come out against the death penalty. I thought it was time for us to get rid of it in Maryland. Even though I was still a sitting prosecutor, I came out and testified that we needed to move beyond it. Criminal justice reform, we made a lot of moves while I was in office to, shift away from the prosecution of drugs and get it into treatment and intervention and prevention programs and the like. We did a lot to expand all those issues. And I thought it was a pretty progressive approach to being a prosecutor, and the public seemed to have liked it, and I think the county benefited from it.
On what issues do you think Democrats stand the best chance of making substantive progress with a Republican-controlled House of Representatives?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Senate, I mean, there have been some gains, over the last few weeks, although you really can't, we still haven't gotten out of the do-nothing House category. I think the House Republicans are really still kind of lagging behind and trying to move legislation. And there's a group of Tea Party Republicans in particular that I think are really problematic and lending themselves to the dysfunctional Congress problems. But, I think getting in there, I think we really need to try and focus on education, school construction and funding for schools is, I think, critical. Training for people who maybe aren't going to go to college but want to try and become a part of the new economy, with new trades. I think we have to do that. Mortgage, we've got so many people underwater. The foreclosure continues to be a problem. We found way advocates can help people stay in their houses, work with the banks and the mortgage companies. I think we need to expand funding for that. We're about to run out of the funding in Maryland for it, and I think we need to continue to push that on. And then locally, economic development is critical, I think, for Prince George's and Anne Arundel. We're trying to get the FBI, for example, to come to Prince George's, bring more jobs and development at metro sites.
Our guest is Glenn Ivey, former Maryland State's Attorney for Prince George's County. He's now a Democratic candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives. Our guest analyst is Will Sommer. He is the Loose Lips columnist and reporter for Washington City Paper. Well, apparently quite a few Prince George's County residents want you and me to just get out of the way so they can direct their own questions to Glenn Ivey. So let's go to Dana in Cheverly, Maryland. Dana, you are on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Kojo. I have a question for Mr. Ivey. Mr. Ivy, I'm a middle-class single mom. I have a son who just graduated from college. I'm about 5 years out of retirement. He's having a difficult time finding a job. I definitely felt the pinch under this, Republican leadership. And so I'm just curious what, some of the things you're going to do, for instance, towards jobs for young people who are just graduating from college, for example, and some of the things that you have in mind for somebody like myself who's, looking toward retirement to ensure that I'm able to do that and to do that comfortably.
Those are great questions. I mean, with respect to the retirement piece in particular, I've run into a lot of people who are saying, Mr. Ivy, I was counting on living off the equity I built up in my home to sort of be the third leg in my retirement. And now that the housing values have gone down, that doesn't seem to be there for them anymore. And I think, the economic growth piece, especially in Prince George's, but also nationally, I think can help to restore a lot of that value in the houses. The 3-part post series on that, I thought, really did a great job of kicking off a debate that was much needed on those issues. Then nationally, I think the Wisconsin issue, where they're rolling back pensions for usually for many times for civil employees, there might be government workers, teachers, police officers, firefighters. That was a troubling bellwether there, and I think we need to make sure that we fight to protect people's pensions that they've earned over the years. With respect to helping young people find jobs, I think there's sort of two components to that. One is growing the economy, certainly in Prince George's County, but also in Washington, D.C. I've got 3 adult children now, and it's tough out there. I think the economy we need to find ways to expand the economy so people get more entry-level opportunities. And one thing they run into a lot is sort of the permanent internship, where you're not really on the payroll, you're not really getting paid. We have to push businesses, I think, to bring people on and let them get started. And then the training and preparation piece, I think, as I mentioned a minute ago, might be training for trades, so people are coming out and they're ready to go work on sites or in businesses immediately. And college affordability is a critical piece too. It's getting so expensive now that increasingly it's almost becoming something almost for the elite if you want to send your kids to certain colleges.
Dana, thank you very much for your call. One of the issues Dana raised was the fact that some property values are being lowered. You said you really like the series that the Washington Post did on this. And I think John in Crownsville, Maryland, has a question that is at the very least related to that issue. John, you are on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask about your position on County Executive Baker's property tax increase.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, there has been a cap on property tax increases by law in Prince George's County since the 1970s. County Executive Baker has found what some people characterize as a way around that, because apparently the General Assembly says that if the funds are to be used for educational purposes, there can be such a property tax increase, and he is proposing one.
Yeah, it's a great question. I know that, it's a very controversial issue. There was a community meeting where the really tempers kind of flared between the council and the county executive over this issue, because I think all of us are sort of feeling the concern. On the one hand, you've got people struggling with a pretty significant tax burden, and the potential of increasing it more is really troubling to them, especially people on fixed incomes. On the other hand, it's clear that our schools are underfunded in Prince George's County. So I think what we really need to do is, as that negotiation works itself out, is try and find additional ways to find funding for the schools. I think with respect to the national piece, federally, it's really kind of, it's sad that we haven't made a greater commitment to funding our schools at the federal level. And I think that's part of what needs to increase, because Prince George's County isn't unique in this position of sort of this Hobson's choice between increasing taxes on people who are taxed pretty heavily already, but you need to improve your schools and you need additional funding to do that. I'd like to see the federal government step into that void and help to provide additional funding for schools. This doesn't even go to school construction and repair, for example, but that's one where if you go look at a lot of our schools, as one of the council members was saying, we don't have the hot water. You've got repairs that need to be made, lights that are out. You seem to
be suggesting that a property tax increase is both inevitable and necessary.
I don't know if I'm saying that, but I mean, I do think that you know, there are a lot of different ways to try and find funding for the schools. For example, with respect to MGM when it comes online, one of the issues
Casino.
that was discussed when they were deciding whether to support constructing that or not was where would the funding go, and a big piece is supposed to go to education. So I know that there's a lot of different sources of money, but I'd like to see the federal government step into this, not just for Prince George's County. Obviously, there are thousands of school districts facing the same difficult choices, and we should help to resolve that.
Interested to get your take on another Maryland issue, the recent death of Freddie Gray up in Baltimore. It was really a horrific case. You know, you former state's attorney. I mean, you know, have you been following this case? You know, what do you think of it? It seems like there's something's off here.
Yeah, it's a real tragic scenario, and condolences to Mr. Gray's family. I mean, it's really kind of a shocking situation. Not sure how that's going to unfold. I only have heard what people have heard on TV and in the news, but I do think that it's pretty clear, given the public reaction in Baltimore and in other cities, we've seen similar sorts of scenarios happen, is that